You are listening to Danièle's podcast. On Danièle's podcast, we dive into everything that drives the DIY scene, past and present. The music, the movement, the mindset. This interview series with Michael Murphy is inspired by his latest book, Pop Music Management: Lessons from the Managers of #1 Albums, published by Routledge. In this episode, the last of the series, we talk about the artists who don't need a manager because their level of self-awareness or instinct is such that they can make more coherent decisions for themselves than a third party. The most brilliant example of this is that of Bobbie Gentry.
Again, keep in mind that I just went in to a big data set of 60 years, who went to #1 in the States, albums. I figured, I'll know all of them. And you don't. When you dig in, you realize that there are big gaps in my knowledge. And Bobbie Gentry was someone I'd heard of. And I knew the song Ode to Billy Joe. And I thought, that's a great song. And, she must have been a one-hit wonder. She clearly didn't matter, or I'd know her the way I know the Beatles or Fleetwood Mac or the Clash. And then when I went looking at who was this woman, who managed her, and I saw, okay, she had a big manager. That makes sense. She had an experience, a man. That made sense because all the men, all the managers in the early part of the data set starting in 64, they were all men. So that seemed logical. And then when you read about her and when you hear her, I would really urge anyone who finds the section about Bobbie Gentry interesting to go and listen to an audio recording of her voice. You can just feel her competence from the way she presented herself just in radio interviews. You can hear her smiling. You can hear her skill with people, with engaging with people, with telling a story. And then I dug deeper and thought, okay, she had a show on the BBC that I might have recollected from I would have been really small, but I probably heard that this woman had a TV show on BBC. And then you stop and you think, this might be the most remarkable woman who ever went to #1. This woman was incredibly intelligent, like brilliantly intelligent. She had a show on the BBC. No American woman had been given an entertainment show on the BBC before. So that's really interesting. She's a groundbreaker globally. She's from the south of the United States. And in a way, she might have more in common with the great Southern Gothic writers, the people from the literature strand of culture, than she did with other Southern white women pop singers or musicians. And her song, like this really, really famous song, and I was delighted. I went to see Casey Musgraves last year, and they played Bobbie Gentry before she came on stage. And I thought, okay, I can absolutely see a line connecting those two insanely brilliant artists in my humble opinion. So why is Bobbie Gentry remarkable? She's remarkable because she's a woman who sings her own songs, who goes to #1 in the States. She's remarkable because she signs to a record label. That's got to be very, very daunting, very intimidating for anyone, any young artist in the 1960s. And they suggested you need a manager, because you can't do this on your own. And they suggest a manager, and she meets the manager, and he's a competent, he's got a track record. He's managed other people before. And she says to him, I don't know if you're a good manager for me. And she signs deliberately and through her own skill and negotiation, a really, really short, and I believe it was 6 months. That's almost unprecedented for a #1 artist to get a manager to work with them on such a short period of time, because the longer the contract, the better for the manager, regardless of the level of success, because you've more chances of the artist doing well. And if the artist does well, you want to get a share of the revenue. But Bobbie Gentry, from before she'd sold a single record, realized, okay, I need to be in control of this. She has an extraordinary career because she goes to number one. She gets TV specials. She's an accomplished performer, an extremely accomplished performer. She's a dancer. And she's danced before she gets a record deal. She's a Las Vegas type dancer. So she goes to Vegas and puts on a show. Very, very rare, I would say. I'd love to know any examples before this of a female putting on a show in Las Vegas who had written their own songs and had gone to number one. This puts her up to me in Dolly Parton level of managerial ability. She choreographs the shows. She designs the costumes. As her career progresses, the logical thing is, wow, you've got one of the biggest songs in the world with Ode to I keep trying to say Ode to Bobbie Jo instead of Ode to Billie Joe. But you've got this global presence with Ode to Billie Joe. Do another one. That's what record labels say. And she thought, no, I'm not going to do that again. I'm not that type of artist. And in the interviews, she absolutely pushed back against this celebrity thing where, photographers would come to take photos. Yeah, we want photos of you at home. I said, no one wants to see me beating eggs or making breakfast. So she was very, very, very self-aware. And she was a very, very vociferous feminist at a time where, from the southern US states, you could argue that she was seen as a country artist. That the types of statements, that the type of presence that she had would have been quite counter. But that makes country music very, very interesting in that it has produced some incredibly strong women like Dolly Parton. And I would include Taylor Swift. And I think Bobbie Gentry should be studied alongside people like that. Now, she didn't have the long career. And part of it is because she decided not to. At one stage, she did the Las Vegas thing. She had she managed a good long career, but not decades upon decades. And she just disappeared.
In relation to what we were saying earlier about the transference between America and France, Bobbie Gentry had a number one in France, not herself, but a cover of her song, which was done by Joe Dassin, who was Jules Dassin and Mélina Mercouri's son, in 1968 with Marie-Jeanne, a brilliant song. I never knew it was a cover version because he got so much success with that song. I mean, at that stage, nobody knew anyway, and nobody had the means to research, which is another thing, unless you were a complete kind of nerd looking up the small, the small writing. But I know this song through a French artist, and I would never have thought about this, that it might have been an American song, because the words are so striking. It's a very, very sad story.
In terms of Bobbie Gentry, that's how good she was. Like, she was a brilliant songwriter as well, that you mentioned that people covered her songs and did it really well. And her songs were often incredibly sad. Now, country music is full of sad songs, but these were very, very in your face sad, and very, very direct and deliberate and very artful as well as passionate. So Bobbie Gentry, please, if you only listen to one artist because of my book, I would absolutely say it's Bobbie Gentry.
From realizing at 13 that he could do it all by himself, start a band, record music, and print t-shirts, Dave Grohl's management style is defined by relentless DIY ethos, creativity, and authenticity, and the help of many women.
Well, Dave Grohl is extraordinary And his story is really extraordinary. And I think it's an amazing business story. I think it's a really important business story. And I grew up listening to independent punk music, and then you hear the Sex Pistols and the Ramones, but most of what I was listening to was British. And then hardcore came along, and Black Flag. That they were scary to me, but brilliant. And Dead Kennedys. And then there was a band I loved called Scream, and they're a little bit different. They were very compelling. And if you'd said to me, Michael, someday you'll be able to go to Lidl and they'll have the autobiography of someone from Scream. I thought, you know, Lidl only stock 20 books. They must buy thousands, tens of thousands of the few books that they do stock. And that's why we should always look at DIY. That's why we should always look at the niche. We should always look at something that's left field, because that can become the mainstream, and it's often ignored at its time. So that's one of the ways that I approach the book, and the Dave Grohl section is a section that I'm particularly proud of in the book, because it took me by surprise. So Dave Grohl, his story, his success is impossible to consider if you take the women out of the story. So Dave Grohl, he grows up with an Irish descent. His mother, she is married to Dave Grohl's father, and they split up. And she is the force in Dave Grohl's life. And she's a teacher who takes another job in a shop to bring up her two kids. And she takes a third job to make sure that they can have what they need. So this is an incredibly diligent woman with very few means who wants her kids to do very well. And she nurtures that, and she's an educator. So you can imagine Dave Grohl not doing that well in school. It is perplexing to her, but it never destroys the relationship. Dave Grohl's father, he's a speech writer, so he's a man of words for the Republican Party. And Dave Grohl, in that Washington, D.C. environment that gives us Minor Threat, gives us Rites of Spring, and then later gives us Fugazi. Grohl is growing up and he's obsessed with music. And he's absolutely focused and dedicated. And I mentioned the brilliant sociologist Richard Sennett, who wrote about mastery. He wrote about how people are brilliant at things because they spend 5,000 hours, they apply themselves. And Dave Grohl probably had done those 5,000 hours by the time he's 80. That's how focused and dedicated young people are, and can be. And he sees, he buys a few records. He's listening to mainstream American radio, to rock music. And his mother has a very good friend who lives in Chicago. And they go there. They're so close that they view her as an aunt, and her kids as their cousins. And they go to Chicago on their holiday. The mom, Dave Grohl, and the sister. And they arrive, and Dave Grohl sees that this Chicago girl, cousin, she looks like a scary punk. And it's a punk rocker in a house, which is different to a punk on the street. So this younger guy sees this kind of cool cousin figure that he liked, and now she's punk. And she brings him to his first gig. She brings him to a DIY gig. She plays him the records that she's bought. Now, this is a woman buying 7-inch singles from hardcore punk bands, cherishing them, and then sharing them with this younger guy. And she educates him in punk rock. And he realizes, he's kept those records, which is remarkable. And they've remained important to him, according to what he's written and spoken about. And he learns while he's a kid, you can do it yourself. DIY is really important. And here's a scene, there's a bunch of kids and they're having a great time in a hall, and it's loud, and it's noisy, and it's wild. And now I'm not great at recall, but I think it was a Naked Ray Gun record, as I remember. And he is fired by DIY. Fast forward a little bit, he's practicing his drums. He's a brilliant drummer at a young age because he plays drums all the time, and he's listening to music and he's figuring out how things happen. He figures out how to make home recordings at quite a sophisticated level, like basically multi-tracks. He learns how you can, instead of me, I would press play, the red button, the black button to play, and the red button to record when I was listening to John Peel or to my friends' records. But he learns that if you have two tape recorders, you can record sound from one. And then if you put the tape back in, you can record something over that in a layer. So he learns, he teaches himself how to multi-track. The young people are incredible. And then he sees an ad for a band called Scream. This local band, they're not well known, but sometimes it doesn't matter if you're not well known, if you belong in a niche. And it means that there might be 10 people in Dublin. My friend, Michael McCaughan, introduced me to so many records that were niche records from America. And I just assumed they were huge, because they're from America. But they might only have put out 500 singles. But to the niche globally, they were very important. And he sees this ad for the band Scream, it is. And they're looking for a drummer. Now, he's too young to go into pubs. And he goes to the audition, and they said, okay, well, and they look at him, they think, oh, this is a young guy. And, how's this going to work out? And they say, okay, we'll play a song that we all know. And so they think, okay, we're going to do a cover so that this young guy can play drums and he'll be crap because he's young, and then we can go on. And they say, what songs do you know how to play? I says, well, let's play one of yours, a Scream song. And they say, do you know one of our songs? And famously, he knows every single one of them. And he plays them brilliantly. And he joins Scream. And Scream never become a huge band. They probably never made a profit. And he talks about that DIY. You get in the van and you're reliant on people's mothers making you a big bowl of spaghetti and inviting you to have a meal with them. And they get Scream. One of the band members leaves. So the Stahl brothers and him, they're trapped in Los Angeles. They've no money. They've literally no money. They're picking food out of bins to survive. Except one of the brothers, both of the brothers, the Stahl brothers, their sister is a mud wrestler. She's someone who makes money by wrestling so lads can see, hey, there's girls in bikinis. But she's earning, and she feeds them, and she makes it possible for these guys to survive. So again, take out the women. And then because he's in a niche band with a cult following in a small scene, when Nirvana need a drummer, he gets a call. And he goes there, totally low resources. Nirvana have nothing when they're starting off. And we know that he goes on to be not just one of the most famous musicians on the planet, not just one of the most successful, but he's in two bands. He's the drummer in Nirvana. He's the people who saw Nirvana. I'm sorry, most of them were looking at Kurt Cobain, myself included, when I saw them. They weren't focused on the drummer. So he's had this extraordinary second stage in his professional career. But take the women out of that story, and it doesn't exist. The Dave Grohl's success story. So Bobbie Gentry and Dave Grohl, those aren't just brilliant stories of musicians, stories of the music industry, stories of art. They're incredibly, in my opinion, important business stories.
We also chatted about Fleetwood Mac's journey, a masterclass in self-management, resilience, and reinvention, overcoming internal dysfunction, legal battles, and industry challenges to take control of their own narrative, proving that a band isn't just a business, but a complex web of personalities, ambitions, and ever-evolving dynamics. So you just have to read the book. It's great. It was then time for Michael's final thoughts on the ever-evolving world of music management.
The lesson might be that you might learn what you need to go to number one in the chart from studying potatoes or studying something that's really, really basic that other people think, oh, yeah, that's the way it's always been done. And I think that's the invitation of management, is that anyone can do it, like whether you're 10 years old or whether you're 100 years old, that it's never too late to do something that's incredibly successful or incredibly just personally rewarding. And the stories in the book are no two stories are the same. Like, it's incredibly diverse. And I hope that the book is an invitation to everyone to consider being a manager.
Thank you for tuning into this 8-episode series. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to check out more of our content on the Punks Listen Hope Collective YouTube channel. À bientôt!